He stepped forward, and uncertainty receded. Purpose reclaimed its space. She showed up without warning, and suddenly every plan scrambled in the wake of her possibility. He entered with soft steps, but each one landed firmly in the landscape of your mind. When she came, the horizon shifted, expectation realigned toward her. He arrived like a revelation, illumination where once there was only blur. She walked in, and stories paused pitifully, waiting for her to complete them. He came carrying quiet power, steady, undeniable, reshaping atmospheres. Her entrance felt like the first note in a symphony you didn't know was playing. He arrived unannounced, and the room exhaled relief as tension dissolved. She entered not as a storm, but as the calm after, the clarity that follows collapse. When he appeared, the air changed. Expectation leaned in to catch every nuance. She came quietly, but change unfurled behind her like wings in flight. He walked in, and time reorganized, meaning rediscovered itself in his presence. Her presence felt like a missing melody returned. Suddenly everything sang in harmony. He arrived at the still point, and around him, story turned. She entered the frame, and all noise quieted. Focus sharpened like a lens adjusting. When he showed up, destiny seemed to nod in recognition. Everything else slowed down. She walked in, and possibility unfolded, old limitations rolling away like mist. He arrived not as spectacle, but like truth returning after absence. Her entrance felt like long-lost clarity, everything once murky, now bright. He came carrying quiet certainty. Fear bowed, and possibilities surged. When she appeared, the unexpected became expected. Miracles felt overdue. He entered softly, but with weight, the gravity of purpose anchoring everything around him. She arrived unrehearsed, yet everything around her seemed to realign in recognition. He came not to claim attention, but attention unfolded naturally around his being. Her presence felt like revelation, truths uncovered without effort. He walked in like an answer you didn't know you were waiting for. Then everything made sense. When she appeared, walls softened and rigidity lost its grip. He arrived carrying calm resilience. Worry dissolved, hope rose. She entered like clarity after confusion. Decision no longer painful. Direction no longer hidden. He came in silence, and his silence spoke truths louder than words. When she showed up, the atmosphere shifted. Expectation turned to inspiration. He entered carrying confidence, unforced. Change followed gently in his wake. Her arrival felt exactly like the moment when struggle gives way to enlightenment. He came with soft conviction. Old doubts crumbled quietly around him. She walked in, and hope returned. Long-expired fears seemed to fade. When he appeared, the world exhaled, a sigh of relief from tension unspoken. Her entrance felt like a compass recalibrating, direction clarified by geometry of her presence. He arrived lightly, but each step sounded like the start of something profound. She came with quiet insistence, making space for transformation without demanding it. He entered as possibility incarnate. Every limitation began to dissolve. When she showed up, expectation lifted, anticipation blossomed into reality. He came as if born from stillness, bringing with him movement unseen before. Her arrival felt like the turning point in a long saga, purpose finally aligned. He entered not with noise, but with resonance, sound waves of change following every breath. When she appeared, shadows retracted. Light claimed space where dark once lingered. He came quietly, but into that quiet poured the force of inevitability. Her entrance felt like clarity ripping through confusion, a precise cutting of illusion. He walked in, and time held its breath, expectations waiting for fulfillment. She appeared as though summoned by longing, filled empty places you didn't even know existed. When he arrived, realities collided and reformed. What was once impossible became the only path forward. She stepped into the silence as if she'd been there before, like memory returning to its rightful place. He arrived not to change everything, but to reveal that everything had already changed in his absence. When she entered, the energy shifted, like a forgotten song playing faintly in the background, suddenly becoming the anthem of your soul. He came not as a hero, but as a mirror, reflecting back what you refused to see in yourself. Her entrance felt like dusk meeting dawn, contradictory and beautiful, signaling the birth of something undefined. He arrived as though the universe had held its breath for this very moment, finally exhaling the truth into form. She didn't just walk into the room. She redefined the air, made gravity feel like a choice. He came in quietly, but the silence that followed was louder than any storm you'd known. Her presence shattered the illusion of control, reminding you that real power walks softly. He stepped into your life like punctuation at the end of a long, rambling sentence. Finally, clarity. She arrived not to be noticed, but to make everything else suddenly seem small in comparison. He crossed the line between ordinary and extraordinary without breaking a sweat, like he belonged there all along. When she appeared, history blinked, unsure whether it was about to repeat itself or be rewritten entirely. He brought silence, not as absence, but as a container where everything could finally be heard. She came like a tide that didn't ask for permission, just swept through and claimed what was already hers. He walked in as though the future had sent him, wearing tomorrow in his eyes. She entered with a kind of peace that didn't soothe, but awakened. She made you feel things you buried years ago. He showed up like déjà vu wrapped in revelation. You knew him before you understood him. Her arrival wasn't a beginning or an ending. It was a bending of time, an overlap of what was and what could be. He arrived with nothing in his hands, but you knew he carried everything you'd been searching for. She came bearing no gifts, yet left behind something priceless, clarity disguised as conversation. He entered the room like a closing chapter, decisive, final, but filled with meaning. Her presence felt like a question that refused to be answered, mysterious, haunting, and endlessly engaging. He didn't change the story. He just exposed the parts we'd been afraid to read out loud. She stepped forward, and every fear you ever entertained stood still, unsure whether to retreat or transform. He didn't speak first, but when he did, it was as though the room had been waiting for the right frequency. Her arrival was like a plot twist you never saw coming, but suddenly everything made sense. He crossed the border between dream and reality so effortlessly, you wondered if he was both. She entered like a prophecy in motion, no longer written, now lived. He came with the weight of silence and the promise of movement, change trailing him like smoke. She arrived in fragments, but each one struck with the precision of something whole. He didn't raise his voice, but his presence made the world whisper in response. She walked in like the missing rhythm to a chaotic beat. Everything finally clicked into motion. He wasn't the storm, they were, but his stillness controlled its path. In the stillness of twilight, she walked in, her presence rippling like a dropped stone across the surface of every life she touched. When he appeared on the horizon, the world shifted. Colors turned sharper, whispers grew louder, and everything you thought you knew became questioned. Silence held its breath the moment she entered the room. Even the walls seemed to lean forward, eager to drink in the gravity she carried. He stepped into the chaos, and the chaos bowed. Disorder found order in his stride, and hesitation vanished in his wake. Just as stars appear suddenly in a darkened sky, Her arrival illuminated corners of your heart you didn't even know were shadowed. When he arrived, time stuttered, as if seconds needed to reorient themselves around the weight of his presence. She came not with fanfare, but with a quiet inevitability that whispered, "This is who we've been waiting for." His arrival felt like the turning of a key in a long-locked door inside your mind. Suddenly everything felt possible. In a room full of noise, she arrived like soft music, subtle yet impossible to ignore, and suddenly everything made sense. No one saw him coming until he stood under the spotlight, and the whole story changed in a heartbeat. When she showed up, it was as though the air cleared, illusions dissolved, and raw truth stood revealed in her eyes. He didn't burst in, but his entrance cracked the foundation. Your certainty trembled, and something new was born. Her arrival felt like the first brush of dawn, gentle, inevitable, and bursting with promise. The moment he crossed the threshold, every doubt that had ever haunted you turned to dust. She came in wearing silence like armor, every unspoken word heavier than a lifetime of speeches. He arrived with the quiet confidence of someone who's seen beyond horizons you didn't even know existed. She entered the scene like a storm dressed in calm. Soft words carried thunder beneath them. When he walked into the frame, the story re-edited itself in your mind. Nothing would ever be the same. Her presence filled the emptiness like a secret melody remembered after years of forgetting. He arrived not by chance, but by design, and every moment since has felt like destiny catching up. When she appeared, the world paused, a breath held, waiting, anticipating the shift she brought. His entrance felt like the turning point in a forgotten novel. Everything clicked. The narrative finally made sense. She didn't announce her coming. She simply arrived, and the ground beneath all assumptions cracked open. In the instant he appeared, color returned to a world that had been draining to gray. Her arrival was a puzzle piece sliding effortlessly into place, revealing a larger picture you'd only glimpsed in dreams. He appeared on the fringe of vision, simple and unassuming, and then collectively, everything turned toward him. When she stepped forward, silence scattered, unsaid thoughts found voice in the resonance she inspired. His entrance felt like a long overdue reckoning. The past bowed in recognition. She came wearing possibility like a finely woven cloak. Suddenly, limitations unraveled around her. The moment he walked in, perception changed. What you believed about strength, beauty, and courage shifted. With one quiet step she arrived, and shadows fled from her presence, retreating into memory. He didn't crash through the door. He simply walked in, and concentric ripples of change radiated outward. When she came, the room exhaled. Tense energies softened as her arrival opened gentle space. His presence wasn't flashy, but the echo of his footsteps announced something inevitable. She showed up like a missing note in a symphony. Complete resonance emerged once she was there. He walked in unassuming, but something within the air shifted. A current had begun. When she appeared, the soundtrack of your inner life rewrote itself. New rhythms, new meanings. His arrival felt like the lifting of an ancient curse. Light washed over places long in shadow. She came quietly, but the quiet carried a roar that unsettled foundations. At the moment he crossed into view, stories paused, waiting for the chapters only he could write. She arrived at the edge of possibility, and everything you thought impossible suddenly seemed real. His presence didn't shout, it whispered, and in that hush, wisdom spoke volumes. When she appeared, space herself bent around her, a magnet pulling all attention into her orbit. He entered like the turning of a tide, inevitable, slow building, and unstoppable. She didn't demand attention. She summoned it with the gravity of her arrival. He arrived as if he had always belonged, and in that belonging the broken pieces found alignment. Her entrance felt like dawn after centuries of night, warmth, clarity, the promise of renewal. He came not to disrupt, just to exist, and disruption followed quietly in his wake. When she appeared, the past and future intersected in her silhouette, shimmering with potential. He stepped in, and time tilted. Every second held more weight than it had before. She arrived carrying unspoken promise. Every unfulfilled dream took comfort in her light. His presence was subtle, yet seismic, quiet strength that undid old patterns. She entered with no fanfare, yet the world rearranged itself to give her space. He arrived, and expectation exhaled, anticipation satisfied in his bearing. When she came, silence reverberated. Every heartstring resonated in tune with her energy. He walked in gently, and the room leaned closer, drawn to the soft power he radiated. Her arrival was a ripple that became a wave, touching every corner before it even recognized its own strength. He came as if summoned by longing, filling what once felt irreparably empty. When she showed up, even the light seemed to bend, illuminating things that had never been seen. He entered with purpose, silent conviction, a shift you felt in the bones. She arrived like a memory regaining color, suddenly vivid, shockingly alive. His arrival felt like a turning page. New chapters unfolded without warning. She showed up unannounced, and in her presence every pretense dropped away. He crossed the threshold, and breath changed. Expectation met resolution. Her entrance was like uncovering a hidden painting, layered, deep, compelling. He came into the frame, quietly, but everything else conspired to highlight him. When she arrived, your heartbeat slowed, trying to take in what was real. He entered with seamless calm, then ripples of change unfurled behind him.